Hello everyone and welcome to another awesome game. We'll be showing from round 2 of this year's Norway Chess. It is the Armageddon game between Hikaru Nakamura and Magnus Carlsen. Obviously the classical game ended in a draw. It was a pretty intense fight. Hikaru even said that at some point Magnus was going really hard and he thought that could go either way. But then he started playing really fast, really well, and it was enough to get a draw. But now what happens here, well, I'm not going to spoil anything, but what I found interesting is that till some move 11, which is, in a pretty wild position, they were following a game Vasily Ivanchuk and Veselin Topalov were playing in a blindfold tournament in the Amber Rapid tournament in 2011. Let's check it out and see what happened here. As usual, it's the Armageddon game. White gets 10 minutes, Black has 7 minutes, but if Magnus gets a draw, then he wins the match. So, okay, knight f3. Hikaru opens up with a reti. We have pawn to d5, g3, g6, and now pawn to d4. Switching it up a little bit between openings. Bishop to g2 is the usual stuff here. Here we have d4, bishop to g7, bishop to g2, and knight to f6. So a little bit of everything. We have castles, and now striking with pawn to c4. We have pawn to c6. Now we transpose into the sort of Neo-Gruenfeld defense, and now after queen to b3, we go into, again, pretty much everything. There could be a King's Indian, could be a bunch of other stuff. We have d captures on c4, queen captures, and bishop to f5. Bishop to e6 also maybe couldn't be played, but you don't want to burn too much time. And Magnus already behind on the clock. We have knight to c3, knight b to d7, and bishop to f4. Both players just nicely developing. Knight to b6 going after Hikaru's queen, and Hikaru goes back. Queen to b3, and now knight f to d5. And this is a very, very rare, situation in the world or in chess history where a world champion is playing in a tournament. But this is the actual clash between world number 1 and world number 2. Magnus Carlsen being the highest rated player and Hikaru being the second highest rated player in the world. And here we deviated from the game that I mentioned, Vasily Ivanchuk versus Veselin Topalov, where Topalov played knight to e4. Their game ended in a draw. And Magnus plays knight f to d5, which is one of the top engine moves, so definitely improving on that game. Bishop to e5, offering a trade of light square bishops, and there are a couple of games where bishop to h6 was played, but here Magnus just goes knight captures on c3, and it is now as of move 12 that we have a completely new game. Okay, b captures on c3 by Hikaru. And now bishop to e4. Bishop to h6 would be a bit more precise, as you really don't get anything by Black here as with trading bishops. But Magnus went bishop to e4. We have bishop captures on g7, king captures, and rook a to c1. We have pawn to c5 by Magnus, d captures on c5, and knight to d7. So he messed up Hikaru's pawn structure to attack it later on, but queen b4 and knight to f6. We have bishop to h3, stopping any rook to c8 action, queen to c7. We have knight to d4, pawn to b6, giving up a pawn to activate his pieces, and Hikaru accepts. C captures, well, not a6, obviously, a captures on b6, and the queen back to b2, guarding that a2 pawn. We have rook to a4 by Magnus, and now a beautiful move by Hikaru. He just plays bishop to e6. And of course, he's not hoping that Magnus captures and he wins Magnus's queen, but it's just a very, very fancy way of remaneuvering the bishop over to b3. So rook to a5 and the bishop back to b3. And okay, this is a much nicer diagonal for the bishop, with the king being on the king side, that is. Pawn to e5 and knight back to c2. We have pawn to h5 by Magnus and pawn to h4. We have knight to g4. Here again, maybe a missed opportunity a little bit. Queen to c8 is a very, very difficult move to meet. It's very, very hard. Pawn to f3 doesn't really do all that much. In fact, it doesn't do anything. Because if you play pawn to f3, you can go for bishop captures on c2, and then you get the h3 square, or you can even go queen to h3, because if you ever capture here, then queen captures on g3, and after knight g4, you are getting checkmated. So after h4, Magnus went knight to g4, and this is now a little bit easier to play for Hikaru. We have knight to a3, pawn to g5, which is attacking Hikaru's king side, but also weakens the his own king side a little bit. And Hikaru goes knight to c4. He goes after the rook. Interestingly, f3 looks like it can be played due to queen c5 check, and now what do you play? King h1 and bishop to b7. The knight can't really be captured due to the g5 pawn being so weak. After queen to d2, you can actually play this, but good luck calculating all of this. I mean, below 3 minutes on the clock. So after g5, knight to c4 by Hikaru going after the rook, and Magnus goes g captures on h4. Offering that rook on a5, and it wouldn't be that great of an idea to capture it, because h captures on g3, the position opens up completely, and not a lot for you to do. Now f3 will fall a victim to queen to c5 with check, and there's not all that much you can do here. For example, you go king to h1, knight to e3, g2 is coming. I mean, this is it's beautiful, but of course that will never happen. So Hikaru played pawn to f3. He now invites queen to c5 check, but now it's not great for him. Now Magnus plays queen to c5 check, king to h1, and Magnus plays bishop back to a8. And interestingly, it's one of those positions where your rook is hanging, and just moving the rook is the way to victory. It's silly, sometimes just silly like that, but you're not just moving the rook away, you're also preparing b5, which will come with tempo, and then you can shift your rook to g6 to h6, you can double up on the h file, you can do pretty much whatever. And for example, if queen d2 trying to go to g5, you will play b5, and now you don't care about this, as you have rook to b6, rook to g6, and now whatever you play, let's say you go knight b2, h captures on g3, if f captures on e4, you don't care. Knight f2 check, and let's say king g2, pawn to h4, pawn to h3, rook is coming again to g6. This is completely winning for black. But okay, easier said than done when you're the one actually playing. Magnus played bishop back to a8, and he invites Hikaru to capture on a5, which he does, and that is the way to play. Knight captures on a5. And now the situation on the king side is so intense that Magnus should just ignore that knight. He should still just play h captures on g3 and continue the attack. But he went b captures on a5, and now Hikaru gets a moment's rest. He plays pawn to e4. Again, queen to d2 is the most precise way to play, but okay, pawn to e4. H captures on g3 by Magnus, and now bishop to d5. Attacking the bishop on a8, Magnus trades, we have captures, and knight to e3. Again, g2 is definitely a threat, so rook to g1 and pawn to h4. Things are not looking great for Hikaru here, who just plays pawn to c4, opens up the queen, and Magnus should just calm everything down with pawn to f6, defend that e5 pawn, and just continue attacking on the king side. But he doesn't. He played queen to d4 here, offered a queen trade, and Hikaru very happily accepted. We have captures, and now pawn to d6. We have rook to b8 by Magnus. Here, king to f6, and Magnus is still winning. But yeah, good luck finding that. For example, king f6, c5, you're just going to play king e6, and there's no way to further advance anything. c6, you don't care, you just capture, and of course pawn to c7, you still don't care, that pawn is not going anywhere. So after d6, Magnus played rook to b8, which is dropping the winning advantage, and now after Hikaru played rook to b1, Magnus can still defend with rook to c8. It's again a very weird decision that Magnus does not play it, as now the pawn is attacked twice. There's no defending it, and if you play d7, then you go rook to d8. And then, for example, if rook to b7, you capture on c4, you don't allow the pawns to connect, and that's it. However, after rook to b1, rook to d8 by Magnus, and now Hikaru is winning, but it is, I mean, if you see the win from here, like Hikaru did, that's just incredible. Hikaru played pawn to c5, which is not crazy. Everyone plays that, even your uncle, because you defend your pawn. But now after Magnus played king to f6, now to find the win, all the way from this position to the winning one, where everyone sees that it's winning, that's not easy to do. So have at it. While I give you a couple of seconds, try and win the game for Hikaru here. The move is pawn to c6, which is very impressive if you found this pawn sacrifice, but you have to find so much more in order to win this. Rook captures on d6 by Magnus. Look at this, pawn to c7, rook to c6, stopping the pawn from becoming a queen, and now rook g to c1. And Magnus saw all of this, and he just played knight to c4, because why wouldn't you? You stop promotion, you don't have to trade rooks. d3, d2 is coming. This is looking awesome for Magnus, but there is one move even the great Magnus missed when he allowed Hikaru all of this. And maybe you haven't seen it then, but now I'm sure you see it. Just for fun, you know, have a few seconds. I mean, wow. Rook to b6. Look at this. Beautiful. The knight cannot capture. If knight captures, then you just capture with check. And after the king moves, you just capture on b6. And that's it. White is completely winning. And if you don't capture, what else do you play? If you don't capture with the knight, you could capture with the rook, which is what was played in the game. But now c8 queen. And you cannot stop promotion. And in fact, it was in this position on move 44 that Magnus Carlsen resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Yes, you have the passed d pawn, you have the passed g pawn, the passed h pawn, but there's just nothing you can do. The knight is hanging, and as soon as you move the knight, doesn't really matter where, just a nice queen d8 check will pick up the rook on b6. There's just no, you're not in time to do anything. It's just that kind of a position. So yeah, after c8 queen, Magnus resigned, and a beautiful, beautiful victory for Hikaru Nakamura, who won his round 1 game in classical format, and now he takes down Magnus Carlsen in Armageddon here. So okay, you don't get the full 3 points, but still you win the matchup. And if Magnus is, you know, looking to win the tournament, which I'm sure he is, as this is his native Norway, he will have to look for chances to beat Hikaru with white, hopefully in classical for him, if not at least in Armageddon. But yeah, crazy stuff. And I mean, this all the way from here, yeah, just you know, pawn to c6, sacrificing this, and then rook to b6. Amazing stuff. So yeah, big congratulations to Hikaru on his victory. I would like to thank Nidi Kumar, Marcus Shib, Marius Klimek, Zeni, and Juan for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.